Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gorgeous Growth Podcast, where we discuss strategies to take your brand to the top. I'm your host, Oscar Guerrero, and today I'm joined by Toby Konitzer. Now, Toby is the CEO of Ocurate. Now, prior to Ocurate, he had started PredictWise. Toby was also working for Facebook Research, and he completed his PhD in computational social science at Stanford University. Welcome to the show, Toby. We're so excited to have you here. You are actually the first tech partner that I have invited to the show, and partially because I'm really, really excited about what you guys have going on. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
Oscar, I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope I carry that honor of being the first tech founder on the show with justification.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure that you will. I mean, really what you guys are doing is cutting edge. There's so many other tech partners out there who are just building almost like better versions of what existed prior to them. And they're in competition with each other in what they're doing there. But however, what Accurate is doing, and I've been following you guys for about a year now. I've been in touch with one of your colleagues, Richard, and what you guys are doing really, really, really is transforming what I believe will transform the landscape of digital marketing and paid ads. Now, when I had originally reached out to you guys and spoke to you guys, I learned a little bit about Predict LTV and what you guys were doing. But recently I learned that you guys have shifted your model and actually kind of like supercharged it even more. I believe that you call it real-time LTV. Is that right?
That's correct.
Real-time LTV. So what exactly is real-time LTV? What is it? What does it do?
Yeah, Oscar, I appreciate starting at the vision actually, because in some ways the metric, the concrete metric that we're talking about matters less, and I want to start there.
Yeah.
For us, the founding ethos of this company was really to bring, I think you described it well, to bring a universal, unifying, organizing principle of measurement to e-commerce that as a quantitative marketer, as a quantitative e-commerce operator, allows you to index everything that you do, to measure everything that you do based on a single metric across the entire enterprise. And this idea of bringing an organizing principle to that world of internet consumer companies is really the vision that led us to start Accurate, led me to found the company, right? Now, of course, that metric then became real-time LTV. And there's a lot of reasons as to why we think it is this unifying metric. We should define it a little bit, I think, because for your listeners, I think they can Google real-time LTV. I think they'll find our white paper, but that's about it because it's greenfield, it hasn't been done before. That metric has not existed until we came into being, right? So real-time LTV is really the ability to use, I would say, a high fidelity first party data that we collect on top of machine learning calibrated for that data that allows you to predict the revenue potential of every one of your leads and customers in real time, before they buy a product, before their first purchase, immediately after the first purchase, right? And that single metric has really the power to transform your business as an e-commerce operator in profound ways, in measurable ways. And I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I guess as the name says, real-time LTV, it's basically a way to decipher the real-time lifetime value of a current visitor to the website. Is that right?
That's correct. So, let's make this very concrete, okay? Let's say Martha is coming to the site of an e-commerce hair care company. It's one of our clients. She comes to that site, and we are immediately able to pinpoint her potential of dollars that she can generate in year one, in the first 5 years, right? Using this sort of data that I described in the machine learning. I think we should define a few other things. I think LTV has had a lot of promise for a long time. I think people understand LTV very differently. Probably helps to start with a definition as to how we conceptualize LTV. Start with lifetime first. Lifetime doesn't mean, let's use our example of Martha. It of course doesn't mean the dollars generated between when she's born and she literally dies as a person. Okay, that term lifetime comes from the sort of machine learning class that models all of that as what we call latent variable problems. So we are interested in her time being alive as a customer. And even that is probably not the most meaningful metric, right? Most companies actually care about what's the LTV in year one, what's the LTV in the first 5 years, right? So the first thing we want to talk about is the time frame. And I think the second thing we want to talk about is the word value. Also, that I think is not entirely clear. People have different understandings, concepts as to what it is. For us, value is preferably gross profit, right? It's preferably revenue minus cost of goods sold. And I'll tell you why. First of all, I think we all know a few companies whose revenue is actually lower than the cost of goods sold, right? If they ask me, I've seen some of these companies, if they ask me, hey, what's the optimal number of customers we acquire? I'll tell them it's very easy. It's a very easy mathematical optimization problem. It's exactly zero. Your optimal number of acquired customers is exactly zero because you're losing money with every customer, right? So for us, really, the value is gross profit. But I think it actually depends a little bit on the case. For some companies, it might be net profit. For some companies, there is, I think, argument to say it should be revenue. But I want to point out that there are no fixed definitions to these elements, these breakdowns of what we call LTV.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So with your software, are you feeding it the profit margin? Are you feeding it profit, or are you just feeding it past behavior by the consumer, whether or not they purchase or not?
Great question. We actually talk about the technology a little bit. We do feed it gross profit. That's our target outcome. Our machine learning is flexible. We could do revenue. The machine learning class is just the same. But that's the outcome. That's what we attempting to predict, right? And then on the input side, and I hope you'll poke me a little bit to at least intuitively go into the machine learning. There is two things that really make the deep machine learning work, that makes it spit out the real-time LTV. One of these things is past transactional data, purchase data, historic purchase data, right? And the other element is really key, is this real-time event stream data. So when our friend Martha comes to the site, really collecting data on how many seconds does she spend on a 1-star review? How many seconds does she spend on a 5-star review? Where does she put her mouse cursor? What product display pages she visits for how long? All these data points we collect and goes into this deep machine learning framework that we build, calibrated for real-time LTV as the outcome.
Now, are you guys able to track what channel they're coming from as well?
We are doing that on a last click basis. We're not an attribution company, but of course we can say, okay, Oscar or Martha, we don't always use, let's use our fictional example, or more specifically, ID 72195 came yesterday from a Google ad, looked at these pages. 2 days later, she came from a Facebook ad and looked at those pages and put an item to cart. Yeah, all of that, our data collection technology is actually able to ingest and ultimately then transports to the machine learning.
So you're able to actually tell the company, hey, these channels on a last click attribution, these channel X, Y, or Z is bringing the best or the worst customer.
Correct. And we can do it in real time, which I think is a very, very important application. I think even for SMB companies that think about this all the time, right? Launch content variations of ads all the time. But in order to understand how well they're doing, I think they have two options here. Okay. First, they can look at conversion, but conversion is not equal to conversion, right? Remember that for most internet consumer companies, 80% of the revenue is generated by 20% of its best customers. That means that a high LTV customer is 16x as valuable as a regular customer, right? So, and they both convert initially, right? So building your evaluation on conversion, not a good idea, not a good idea. Failed to understand the Pareto principle distribution of income, of revenue, of e-commerce, of internet consumer companies. Don't want to do that, right? The other way to do it is you say, yeah, okay, look, I'm going to let these campaigns run. And I'm going to look at the revenue brought in by cohort on the last 6 months or the last 12 months. Sounds great in theory, but in practice, not feasible. You cannot let hundreds of acquisition strategies just run for half a year, put the money without understanding the value. Nobody does this, right? What we do is we shorten the time to value here. We give them signal on all their acquisition strategies in real time, so you can calibrate and adjust in real time, upspend what's working, downspend what's not working, and ultimately reach this equilibrium of a most efficient spending model across all your acquisition strategies. And that's really, I think, one of the first big applications of real-time LTV. We can talk about some of our successes there as well.
Yeah, I would love to hear about that. This is fascinating.
Yeah, let's use a company called Good Clean Love, and they're a very small e-commerce company. One of our dear partners, one of our first partners, doesn't have the data sophistication of a behemoth e-commerce company, but they did this very simple thing that I just outlined. They looked at their acquisition channels and they said, okay, well, just every week we'll look at the LTV generated by channel, right? We can go crazy here. I mean, I mentioned content variations. We can say, oh, every content variation, we will actually key to real-time LTV. We can do it across hundreds of different strategies. These guys just did it by channel. They said, okay, I want to know, did Google Performance Max perform or outperform Bing CPC in the last week? And they spent more money on what was working, and they spent less money on what was not working. And within 3 months, they actually increased the proportion of high-value customers by 19%, which, if you do the math right, that's a revenue increase of 15%. Now, for these guys, they're small revenue numbers. But the point here is that this is a simple strategy that doesn't even use half the sophistication that you can do with real-time LTV on the acquisition front, right? And they've shown really, I think, impressive results over a very short time.
Wow. So basically you can cut the time in the testing, which obviously leads to saving money, because you don't have to burn through as many creatives, as many channels, as many tests. You will know how soon will you know where to place your budget.
That's correct, Oscar. And I think the argument here is even more than time. And we can, again, make this a little bit more concrete. We've seen many examples like this in the wild. Let's do a stylistic example, okay? Let's say you're running a campaign on Google Performance Max and you're running a campaign on Facebook brand, yeah? Now, on Facebook brand, you're getting 2 conversions, and on Perf Max, you're getting 1 conversion, okay? And let's say that happens within the first 2 weeks. Again, stylized example. Now, the natural thing to do for most marketers say, okay, well, conversions are all they are. So I'm going to upscale Facebook and I'm going to downscale Performance Max. But let's just assume that Performance Max actually brought you a high LTV customer who's 16x as valuable as a regular customer, right? And Facebook brought you 2 regular customers. Now you're losing real money, and you can actually quantify how much you're losing, right? And that's exactly the idea behind real-time LTV, is to give you that real-time measurement, help you make or avoid wrong decisions like this one, right? You actually, let's just say the 2 guys that you acquired from Facebook bring $1 each, and the Google guy who you missed, high LTV customer, 16x, brings you $16, right? Now you're missing a profit margin of 8x. And that's exactly the mistake that we help you avoid, right? On top of the time benefit.
Now, as a retention marketer, I imagine that do you have ways to actually feed this information after the purchase to a email marketing team to be able to segment that audience correctly and actually, I guess, treat your high LTV audience in a different way, because you're not going to speak to them the same way as you're going to speak to everyone else?
I think it's a really great point, and I also appreciate the way that you talk about difference in segmentation. You say speak to high LTV customers differently. Absolutely, you should do that. You should segment your audience, and you should find a performance maximizing strategy for your high LTV customers. That will be different from your performance maximizing strategy for your low LTV customers, right? Here's what doesn't work. What doesn't work is, we will segment. We've seen this kind of instinct a lot, especially also on the SMB. We will segment and then we will take the high LTV customers and we will give them larger discounts. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? You don't know. Maybe it's a working strategy, but maybe it's not a working strategy, right? The right thing to do is you segment your audiences and then you experiment. You say, hey, now I have my cohort of high LTV customers and I need to run experiments to understand across churn prevention, across upsell, what are the interventions, the movable levers I can move as a brand to help them maximize their full potential. That's the right way to think.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% in agreement with you. And that is a very typical frustration that I come across as well. It's like, look, we can send more sales to these people, but really all we're doing is moving up a future sale at the cost of margin and ultimately reducing their lifetime value, if at least we're measuring that in terms of profitability. So I would definitely I agree with you 100% there on how to deal with that. Have you guys do you partner, do you work with, like, how does that work exactly for you as a team? Do you feed this information directly to the departments that are doing the media buying and writing the emails, or are you giving this information to like a CMO who is then making the decisions and talking to the other departments?
Yeah, I wish I would have asked myself this question a lot earlier. I should have talked to you a lot earlier. Initially, we were an API for predictive analytics, which we still are. I think the tough thing is it's pretty hard to use raw data, right? Raw predictions. What we're doing now is we actually servicing what we call the Ocurate portal that exactly shows you the performative reality of your acquisition campaigns week over week. And I think one of the key target audiences is the CMO who logs into the dashboard and then kind of says, okay, last week, Google Performance Max generated 2x LTV compared to all my other acquisition strategies. So I'm going to go and tell my executor to upscale here the money and take it from channels that don't work, right? So I think that's the way that certainly this first application of real-time LTV, the evaluating acquisition strategies, is consumed most frequently in the e-commerce companies.
Okay. But do you guys advise them at all, or they just have access to that data and then you expect them, like, they should have the expertise to know what to do with it?
They have access to the dashboard. We do advise to basically scale gradually, right? So here is an example. You log in, and last week, Google Performance Max had done 2x compared to Facebook. Absolutely, put more money there, but you do it gradually. Put a little bit more money there, and then you understand through our dashboards that this is yielding the increase in return that you expect. And if it does, you go up further, right? So you're really finding that equilibrium through an iterative process by adjusting your spend and then seeing what that does based on the real-time LTV by channel, which we surface in the dashboards that we present to our customers.
Now, I'm sure that the only concern with this that people will have is the margins of error. So some people say, past performance is not always indicative of future performance. Things change, the market changes, and so people's behavior changes. So how often is the machine learning? How often is the algorithm adjusting?
Yeah, super relevant question. And I think I took a note here, Oscar, because my brain also does not work the way it used to anymore. At least my memory, I should specify that. I think there is two components to it. Okay, one component is the very correct observation that outside factors change. You launch new products, you're becoming a new company, or you adjust certainly the image of your company, you adjust your customer base, all of that, right? And we deal with that by retraining the machine learning constantly. The machine learning is retrained every month to really take into consideration these time trends and say, look, we have to take into account the inherent dynamicism of any consumer-facing company, right? As we just discussed. So that's one component. The other component I think you also hit on is predictive accuracy. We're talking about making decisions based on predictive analytics, right? Based on machine learning. Well, you better convince yourself that the machine learning is telling the truth. Otherwise, you're actually making the wrong decision, right? Which is something we don't want to do. And we actually have a trick to do that, which in the statistical lingo is called backtesting. But the very first thing we do is we want to convince the brands that our ability to predict real-time LTV is true. And in fact, is true with more than 90% accuracy. And here's how we do that. We can say, look, give me customers that have been with you for 6 months. We just treat them as new customers. You don't share the revenue data with us from those last 6 months. We predict their revenue as if they had never purchased before, which is, of course, the big value proposition of real-time LTV. And then the brand can convince itself how accurate is that based on data that obviously we have never seen. So it's a way to really instill this confidence in the accuracy of predictive analytics. And my observation has been that this is something that we really need to take great care of and also pride in, because we're asking marketers to completely change the way that they interact with their customers, right? So establishing that trust, that verifiable trust in the data and the machine learning is key. And for us, it's how we begin any engagement with one of our clients.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow. So let me ask you, I mean, you guys, it sounds to me that there's always things that are, you are experimenting, you are applying whatever technology is available to you at the current moment. So this may be a hard question, but where's the future going to lead?
I love where this is going.
Where is this going? That's my question.
I love where this question is going, because I think we're smallish company, but we have pretty strong R&D track record. You mentioned in your introduction that my background actually is in academia. I have a PhD. I'm an applied researcher, and we're always researching kind of at the forefront of these developments. What's the next thing? And I think I'll tell you very specifically here what's the next thing, because we're onto that and we are close to launching a prototype. It's called value-based bidding. And it is inherently the ability to source the real-time value, the real-time LTV value back into the acquisition platforms in real time. Technologically, that's actually very complicated to do. Yeah. We figured out a nice way to do that. And ultimately, the promise here is it's like lookalike audiences on steroids, right? No more spreadsheets that some marketer then has to adjust it to. No, we feed the signal real time back into the acquisition platform, allow the acquisition platform to optimize on that one metric, which is the only metric that matters. And I think, Oscar, I don't think I'm exaggerating here when I tell you this is really the potential to revolutionize the way that acquisition happens on these platforms. I used to be at Facebook. We talk to these guys all the time. We talk to the Facebook technical guys, the Google technical guys. This is the future that they want, is value-based bidding. There is a reason that they want it. They want it because it eliminates all these, I don't want to say shady companies that deal with lists of emails that are floating around, but sort of from a privacy perspective, right? But if you build this anonymized, real-time, bi-directional feedback from the brand to the platform, and to do it based on this one metric that in our intro we said is the only metric that we really think matters to brands, right? I do think that has the potential to revolutionize acquisition, and that's kind of the focus on what we're building out now.
Wow, that's amazing. Sounds to me like you guys are implementing what Meta has been trying to implement themselves, because I know that ultimately what they want is they want to be able to have a platform that you can run your ads and you really don't have to make all the adjustments that you typically do within the platform. It'll just run and do what it's supposed to do based on the data.
That's exactly right. And I'll tell you a $1 trillion mistake that Meta has made. Yeah. Meta could have very easily built a browser functionality and forced all the vendors that advertise on Meta to actually use the Meta browser 10 years ago when e-commerce started, even before then. Well, yeah, 10 years ago, even before then. And what would have that would have led to the ability of Meta to build this complete black box system the way that you just described, and there would have been no competitor. But that's not the history of D2C e-commerce, of course. Meta didn't do it. You have these independent e-commerce brands, D2C e-commerce brands that don't operate in the Meta black box and the Meta infrastructure and the Meta ecosystem. And that possibility is no longer there for Meta, but it is there for us, right? So Meta and Google understand that they need to work with the brand or with analytics partners of the brand to make something like value-based bidding work, right? And it's an interesting point because particularly Facebook did have the opportunity to build this all in-house, all by itself, without any partners that would have taken a slice of that revenue cake, but they didn't.
Yeah, they missed the boat on that, unfortunately. So listen, this has been.
Did you say fortunately or did you say unfortunately?
No, unfortunately. Well, unfortunately for them.
Well, fortunately for personally, I think fortunately,
but that's awesome. So, where can people find out more about Ocurate?
Yeah, appreciate the question. Certainly on our website, which is ocurate.com, OCURATE.com. It's a little bit of a interesting name, which is a mix of accurate and oculus. So vision related, a Latin term, and accuracy, right, which is sort of what we want to be. But always happy also to get emails if you guys want to drop me an email at Toby, Tobi at Ocurate.com. Always love conversations with brands, particular. Doesn't matter how big those brands are. Love to talk data-driven strategies. Also really like to talk about how to build data-driven orgs. You know, I think the advantage that very young D2C e-commerce companies have is they really have an ability to build a data-first or data principles first company. That's exciting, and that's always something I like to discuss.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you, Toby. Best of luck. Thank you.
Oscar, thank you again for the invite.